Welcome to
Theories
of the third kind.
Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host joining me today is Daniel's son.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we do have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast. For just $6.66 a month, you can enjoy weekly premium audio episodes and access to our entire back catalog for over 270 episodes.
That are all ad-free. Or if you're a big baller and you want to spend a little extra change, then you can sign up to our premium video membership service where you get not only an extra audio episode each week, but you also get an extra video episode each week for $9.99 a month. And you can sign up to that by going to our website, theoriesofthethirdkind.com. Right there in the middle of our website, it's going to be a button that says Supercast. You click on it, it'll take you over to the Supercast page where you can sign up. It takes you only 10 seconds to sign up.
Now, we know things are tough out there right now, so if you can't afford a premium membership, but you still want to help us out, you can do so by leaving us a written review on iTunes or Spotify.
That helps us out a lot.
However, don't feel pressure to leave us one. If you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoot, Sasquatches, chupacabras, ghosts, Illuminati members, underground lizard people, whoever or whatever you are to enjoy the show. Also, remember this episode is entirely human-made. No AI were harmed or used in the process other than for the base graphic.
And that is the end of the announcements. All right. So today's episode is the Human Cookie Cutter, aka the Billings Mutilation. And to start off today's episode, we are first going to go over where this entire story takes place at so that we have a good understanding of the location. So I need everyone to sit back and to imagine that you are standing in the middle of the United States. Okay? Now go directly south and you will end up in South America.
So now you're in South America. We will be traveling to the country of Brazil, specifically to the state of Sao Paulo. Now, we do have a map of that location, and I'll post it up right here for everyone to take a look at. And if you aren't watching us on YouTube, then you can go to our website, theoriesofthethirdkind.com, and click on today's episode. There will be all the images from today's episode.
All right, so there's the country of Brazil, and you see that little red square on the map?
Very low.
Well, we're going to zoom into that location, and that takes us to the state of Sao Paulo and to the city of Sao Paulo, which is on the right-hand coastline of Brazil. And again, on this map right here, we have a little red square, and we're going to zoom into that location.
Feel like I'm on Google Earth. All right, so what we're looking at right now is a freshwater reservoir on Sao Paulo's south side. This area is called the Billings Reservoir. It is a giant lake that has multiple freshwater inlets where a lot of people go swimming, fishing, and boating. Now, we're going to zoom in again, even further.
Yes. And what we have here is a specific water inlet. And that is where our entire episode takes place at today. All right. Now that everybody has a good visualization of the area, let's get into today's episode.
So our story starts off on September 29th, 1988. It's a normal Thursday afternoon at the Billings Reservoir, and a local boy decides that he wants to take his slingshot and go shoot some birds near the shoreline of the nearby inlet,
which is the one we have pictured right up here. So the boy walks to that specific inlet that we just talked about, and he decides to get into the water where the green arrow is located. And he begins walking around the shoreline, heading to the other side of the shore where the red arrow is located. Because as he's walking along looking for birds, he notices in the distance on the other side of the shore that there's a lot of vultures on top of something. And he doesn't know what it is. So he's like, I'm going to go fucking shoot those things. So he decides instead of swimming across this 80-meter section, he's just going to walk around it.
So now as the boy is walking along the shoreline where the green arrows are located, you see him go around it, he occasionally would draw up his slingshot and shoot at the random birds that he would see. He would continue to do this until he got to where the last green arrow is located. And that is when he noticed something strange a few feet in front of him. On the shore was something very large, laying on the ground. And there were a ton of vultures on top of whatever this was.
Now, initially, the boy thought maybe it was a dead animal, but he wanted to make sure that's what it was. So he took his slingshot and began shooting at the vultures to get them to go away so that he could get a clearer look at whatever this was. Once the vultures flew away, that is when the boy realized that this thing was not a dead animal. It was actually a dead human being.
The boy immediately took off running back to the other side of the shore and alerted some residents there, who called the local authorities. The police arrived and the local boy took them to the shoreline, but didn't walk around to where the body was at. Instead, the child pointed at the body, which was across the inlet on the shore, covered in vulture still.
So this is not funny. I'm not laughing at the situation. I'm laughing at what the police did because they stood there on the shoreline and looked across it and was like, "Huh. So you're telling me the only two ways we could get to the body is either we have to swim across or we walk across this muddy inlet shoreline all the way around, get the body, and then carry it all the way back around." They were like, "No, we're not going to do that." So instead, they requested Sao Paulo's Corpo Bombeiros, aka the fire rescue team. So the fire rescue service arrived and they crossed the reservoir by boat and brought the body back on a makeshift stretcher.
Now, at this point is when the police and the other authorities were actually able to see the body up close. The body was that of a middle aged man in just his underwear, and he was severely mutilated.
From what they could see, the man's eyes had been gouged out. His eyelids and part of his face, including his left ear, lips, and parts of his jaw and neck, were all cleanly cut off of his body, as if someone had a medical scalpel and removed these parts. Which, by the way, if you ever seen the TV show Breaking Bad, when Gustav Fring goes inside to go meet Hector Salamanca, and Hector blows him up, and he walks out, and it pans and shows his face, and like half of his face is a skull, the other half is normal. That's exactly what this body looked like.
Ooh.
Which I do have the crime scene photos, which we're going to go over later.
Now, when the police officers saw that the man was severely mutilated, that is when they realized this was beyond any ordinary homicide or accident. And that is when they decided to close off the area and call in additional investigators and forensic technicians to start their investigation.
The authorities turned the body over to the local medical legal team in Sao Paulo, and they began a full autopsy. The forensic examination revealed a pattern of mutilations and removals of body parts that struck experienced pathologists as highly unusual.
For example, large sections of skin, muscle, and organs have been removed with medical precision. Extensive tissue from the face, neck, and head was removed, including the eyes and eyelids, ears, internal and external, lips, and tongue.
The victim's mouth cavity was completely emptied, and the jaw tissue was stripped in a manner eerily reminiscent of classic cattle mutilation cases. The autopsy report also noted that the incisions were remarkably neat and precise. The edges of the wounds were uniform and showed minimal bleeding, suggesting that they may have been cauterized or made with a sharp instrument that sealed it as it cut.
There were clean, circular holes on certain parts of the body that were 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter and symmetrically placed. For instance, the shoulder and arm regions had those circular holes in them. And also in these holes, the underlying tissues, muscle, and fat appeared to have been extracted. The autopsy report noted that these holes were not gunshot wounds because the edges were too clean and there was no internal bullet trauma.
Now, one of the most disturbing things that the autopsy stated was that major internal organs were missing, despite no large opening in the torso for them to be taken out of. The chest cavity had collapsed or sunken in as a result of the removal of these organs.
A small circular hole about 1.5 inches across was found at the navel area, aka the umbilical cord area, your belly button. The edges of this opening at the navel were perfectly even, as if punched or cut with a biopsy-like tool, leaving the abdomen empty and flattened.
The autopsy also reported that the lower body had mutilation as well. The genitals and rectal area had been removed. The scrotum had been cut out with an incision.
Now, the best part, The anus was cored out in a circular cut, roughly 3 by 6 inches in diameter.
So the something came and just cored out the butthole. Wow. It's disgusting.
Yeah, the entire rectum and sections of the lower intestine were missing from the body.
Damn. Lower intestines were all missing. That's crazy.
And the lower intestine's pretty long, but not as long as the upper intestines, right?
Yeah, so whatever must have sucked out that butthole must have sucked the intestines as well.
Like spaghetti.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, I just see like a big alien just fucking eating.
That's fucked up. Oh my God. All right.
Props to the chef.
So the autopsy also noted, and we quote, an astonishing absence of blood. There was no blood at the scene, like none at all.
The autopsy went on to state that only a trivial amount of blood, around 20 milliliters, was recovered from the corpse. And a little knowledge nugget. The average adult human body contains approximately 5 liters of blood, which 5 liters converts to 5,000 milliliters. So this guy only had 20 milliliters of the 5,000 milliliters of his blood left, meaning he only had 0.4% of his blood in his body. You know, that's how much blood they fucking would drew from me when they try to do a blood dump.
It drew that much out of you?
Yeah, well, I think it got up to 40, but that's it.
Oh, 40 milliliters? They got 500 out of me. I think they went up to like 750 one time, and I started to get a little dizzy. They're like, oh.
I have to go do another one, but.
Damn. God, man, you bruise when you do that.
That's because they have to dig for the vein, because they'll stick it in there, they'll find it, then it moves, then they.
Oof. No. So the autopsy goes on to say that the wounds themselves had bled very little, consistent with rapid cauterization. There were no typical defense wounds or signs of struggle on the victim's body, no bruises, no restraint marks, or trauma indicating a fight. Likewise, no evidence of gunshots or stab wounds were found beyond the precise cuts that were made.
Examiners also noted that the overall condition of the body was oddly pristine, given the extent of the mutilation and the vultures attacking it. There was no significant decomposition, and even rigor mortis had not fully set in at the time of the examination. This suggested that the death was recent, estimated roughly 48 to 72 hours prior to the autopsy, and the body had not been exposed to the elements for long.
Now, one of the most important conclusions that the forensic scientist came to was that the wounds the victim had were inflicted while the heart was still beating, which meant that the victim had been alive, or at least not fully dead yet, whenever the mutilations occurred. The pathologist concluded that the extreme pain and shock from these mutilation injuries likely caused pretty much a heart failure, cardiac arrest in the victim, and that is what they recorded his cause of death as, heart failure.
The victim was identified as 53-year-old Joaquim Sebastião Goncalves. Once the police got the autopsy report, cause of death, and identification, they found the man's family and notified them.
What the police discovered is that the man went missing 3 days prior to his death, and the family had already reported him missing to the police. So,
Well,
the police were like, oh, you did? Well, here he is. The family stated that Joaquim liked to fish near the reservoirs and that he suffered from epilepsy.
now the family did request that the police not release his name so that they could mourn his death in private. The police honored this request and did not let the media know the man's name, which, by the way, a little later on in the episode, we'll go over how his name was actually leaked to the media.
Yeah, which if you do any type of real deep research into this like we did, you'll learn that a lot of people who report on this case get it completely wrong. They'll say that the man's identity was never discovered, you know. That's not the case. I'm staring at you, history.com. They got it completely wrong.
You wrong.
All right. So the police had all of this information on the victim, and a lot of it was very odd and strange. There was no evidence of a murder, no suspect, no motive, no human inflicted wounds of the usual sort. Yet the injuries were far too precise and extensive to be explained by natural decay or hungry animals.
Also, the police found it odd that the victim was discovered wearing only underwear, and his clothes were still missing. And with all this information, the police were at a loss and they didn't want to stir public fear, so the authorities decided to close the case quietly.
And it kind of went well with the family's request because the family didn't want any publicity and they just wanted to have a private funeral and they didn't want his name to be released. And the police didn't release his name.
Wait, so he was only found wearing his underwear,
Mm-hmm.
but they removed his genitals and his anus and everything like that, so they had to put the underwear back on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the death was officially recorded as natural or attributed to a medical emergency accident followed by animal activity. So yeah, they pretty much listed it off as natural or that he had a medical emergency, died, and then the animals ate him. Now they listed this as the official cause of death despite the forensic contradictions. And like we stated earlier, they quietly filed this case away.
Here's a little knowledge nugget for you. In regards to this case, officials actually misdirected the public on purpose, and for years afterwards, reports of the incident stated that the location was actually the Garaparinga reservoir rather than Billings. This was done possibly to avoid drawing attention to the case or site, or simply due to initial misreporting. However, that error is why almost 99% of individuals who report on this call it the Garaparinga reservoir mutilation.
Yep. When it's actually the Billings mutilation.
Hmm.
The police purposely misdirected everybody in the case, calling it the wrong name, which that Guaraparinga is a reservoir that's close by the Billings one. So just kind of speculation as to why they did that, you know? So like we stated earlier, this story was kind of kept quiet and out of the public eye. However, years later, reports of the case were leaked to the public. That is when the full story of what happened emerged.
So, like we stated earlier, the case was closed in 1988, and after that, no one really talked about it. However, that all changed 5 years later in September of 1993.
Photographic evidence and autopsy documents of this case surfaced and were circulated among Brazilian UFO researchers. The source of the leak remained anonymous. However, the information was striking enough to shock and intrigue the UFO community.
One of the individuals who took interest in this case was Encarnacion Zapata Garcia. Now, Encarnacion was a Spanish college professor and a researcher of animal mutilation cases. After she learned about the case, she took a keen interest in it and obtained the graphic crime scene photos and the coroner's report, and even interviewed people involved in the original investigation, including the original medical examiner.
During this period, Encarnacion was investigating similar unexplained cattle mutilations in the United States and noticed eerie parallels in the cuts and missing organs in this human case. It was at this point that Encarnacion became convinced that this was a genuine case of human mutilation by extraterrestrial beings. In her view, the precision of the injuries and the absence of blood pointed to something beyond known terrestrial processes, possibly the same unknown agents behind the livestock mutilations that were happening worldwide.
Encarnacion published her findings in a UFO magazine titled the Brazilian Revista UFO. The first article, issue number 25, that ran in 1993, ran under the title of
Mutación de seres humanos por extraterrestrials, aka
The Mutilations of Human Beings by Extraterrestrials? Question mark?
The article described the case in detail and proposed the idea that aliens had abducted Joaquim, surgically harvested parts of his body, possibly for research, and dumped the body of his back onto the reservoir. She noted this would be the first well-documented human mutilation of its kind on record.
Upon the release of this article, it ended up creating a buzz around the case itself, so much so that less than a year later, UFO Magazine released a follow-up to that article titled Garaparinga Case. The discussions continue.
See, even then, they were labeling the title wrong.
Police did a good job.
Yep. Now, at the time, this case still did not reach mainstream media. However, within the UFO and paranormal research community, the case became a sensation.
Photos of the corpse circulated on early internet forums and even in UFO conferences. convincing some that this was smoking gun evidence of alien abduction. In Brazil, the case began to be referenced in books and UFO conferences.
For example, Noticias Populares, a popular tabloid, printed an article in April of 1997, and the weekly magazine Extra did so in August of 1997, both framing the case as possibly the work of extraterrestrials or the mythical chupacabra as a creature blamed for, draining livestock blood. So they blamed one of those two. Now, as these sensational stories and theories grew around this case, some investigators became upset and decided to clarify the facts. They were like, look, too much speculation. We want to get down to the facts of it.
For example, Claudio Covu, who was a Brazilian engineer and ufologist known for a skeptical, evidence-based approach, he decided to do his own research into this case. Covu, along with his wife Paula Covu and colleague Tania da Cunha, accessed official records from the 1988 investigation through their contacts in the police and medical community.
In July of 2002, they published an article in issue 80 of the UFO magazine titled Revista UFO. The article was titled Novas Información Escalación on Macrobo Caso Guaraparinga, aka New Information Clarifies the Strange Guaraparinga Case.
The article blew away some myths and corrected earlier misinformation. It confirmed the victim's identity as Joaquim Sebastião Goncalves, age 53, and revealed his medical background, epileptic, which all of this had previously been kept private.
The report also clarified the location that the body was actually found was the Billings reservoir, not the Guadalaparinga, stating that the false naming was attributed either to an initial mix-up or that the police were deliberately hiding it and steering the public towards Guadalaparinga rather than it being in the actual Billings. But it occurred at the Billings reservoir.
The report then ends with a shocking statement. It presents evidence that scavenger animals were responsible for the mutilations. Then they go on to say that they consulted wildlife biologists and forensic specialists, and they concluded that the wounds clearly show the work of known scavengers, like vultures, stray dogs, rodents, and various insects that like to suck anuses and lower intestines out.
Like spaghetti, according to Dan.
Yeah.
So the Kovu team also stated that witness testimony supported a natural explanation. Locals had indeed seen the body covered in vultures when first found. Vultures and other creatures tend to target soft tissues, eyes, lips, organs, tongue, buttholes first, and then, this matched the pattern of Joaquim's corpse whenever they found it.
They also noted that the short time frame, roughly 1 day between death and discovery, according to the official time of death estimate, was sufficient for substantial scavenging, especially in a warm climate teeming with wildlife and insects.
In summary, Kovu and his colleagues demystified, quote-unquote, the case. They concluded it was not an alien abduction or mutilation at all, but rather a tragic natural death followed by opportunistic animal scavenging, later blown out of proportion by UFO enthusiasts.
Yeah, those are some very nice animals to put the underwear back on.
Yeah, I know, right?
Removed your balls, penis, anus, but you know what? We'll leave you some decency.
And they create a hole 1.5 inches wide and suck all the organs out of it. Makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Now, they did emphasize the need for scientific rigor and warned against turning every strange death into a UFO story. After that report was published in 2002, many in the UFO community accepted their findings. However, some did not. Even to this day, this case is split into two beliefs. Some people believe the official natural explanation, that the victim had died and the animals ate parts of him, which is why he was mutilated. Others believe that the wounds were too precise and that it was the work of extraterrestrials.
Yep. And that right there is the story of the human cookie cutter, aka the Billings Mutilation case. However, just like every week, our episode does not stop there because now we are going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this case.
All right, so our first strange fact and finding is called victim. So like we previously mentioned, the victim in this case, his identity was kept private for a very, very long time until it was released in that UFO magazine in 2002. Well, during our research into this case, we uncovered more information about this individual and that no one has ever reported on. So you get to hear it here first.
So, what we know about this individual is that his name was Joaquim Sebastio,
Goncalves.
and he was 53 years old. Now, the new information that we found out is that he was married, he was of Catholic religion, and worked as a caretaker and guard on a nearby property. And when we say nearby the area that he was found dead at. Yeah, that's crucial as to us finding the exact location that we showed at the start of the episode. That exact location is where he was found, and no one else has that except us. We used his job site and information that was in the police report to track the exact location of his body.
Also, Joaquim had heart disease and suffered from seizures. He had to regularly take phenobarbital, which is a barbiturate medication primarily used to manage and prevent seizures. Also, he was a heavy drinker and he loved to fish at the reservoirs.
Another piece of information that we uncovered was that on the day he went missing, he arrived at his work location and left his vehicle there, which we do have an image of the reservoir where his body was found. And on this image, we have a green square, which is where he worked at as a caretaker and guard on that property, which we'll post that up right there for you to take a look at.
As he walked down the path where we placed those green arrows at, before crossing over the shallow area towards the other side of the reservoir, Joaquim removed his clothes, neatly folded them, placed them into a bag, and hid the bag in a nearby brush.
Then, while only in his underwear, Joaquim crossed the far bank and began fishing. Now, what happens after that is only speculation. So we'll save that for the theories section. But that's what we know for sure happened.
So we actually found his clothes in a nearby bush.
Yep, they found his clothes in a nearby bush. That was like later on towards the end of the investigation. Somebody's like, hey, look what I found, a baggie of clothes. And they're like, oh, shit, that belonged to some dude that died a little while back.
I just think that all the police and everyone going back and forth were pretty much going by it so many times.
Yeah, but it was like in this bushy area.
All right, so our next strange fact and finding is called medical examiner notes. Now, one of the things that not many people talk about, especially Kovu in his 2002 report, is the medical examiner's notes about absence of predators or typical scavenging marks.
So like we previously talked about, Kovu stated in his 2002 report that animals were the reason that the victim had mutilation marks. However, in the original medical examiner notes, the examiner states, and we quote,
I do not see any obvious signs of an animal attack. In many outdoor deaths, scavengers leave ragged tears, random bite marks, and scat. But in this case, the injuries looked surgical rather than animalistic.
The clean cuts, lack of gnawing or tearing, and the fact that many wounds were in tucked away areas like underarm or inside the mouth seem inconsistent with typical scavenger behavior. Some injuries, such as the precisely cut in half of a lung reportedly found remaining in the chest cavity at a sharp 45-degree angle, were beyond what any known animal could do in the absence of a large entry wound, end quote. So what he said was, somehow, there was not a large entry wound, but somehow his lung was cut precisely at a 45-degree angle. And he doesn't know how, since there's no marking of someone cutting him open and then doing that.
Had to be animals then, man.
Yeah. Slither inside there. And
moving on to our next strange fact and finding is called recreate. Now, like we mentioned before, investigators on this case were so perplexed by the mutilations that they decided to do their own little experiments in secret.
Definitely in secret, and this was never told to the public or leaked to the media until now. So the lead detective in the case, Marco Antonio Desalago, and the chief medical examiner, Dr. Jorge Oliveira, together they placed a dead dog's carcass near the discovery site where they found Joaquim's body, and they secretly monitored this dead dog's carcass for the next few days. Vultures and other scavengers did consume the dog, but the damage, aka random tearing and consumption of flesh, it looked nothing like the precise wounds on Joaquim. This experiment was kept secret, and it was only talked about once whenever the medical examiner was interviewed in the early 2000s, but that never aired. You have to dig for that. So, yeah,
Well,
they performed their own little experiment.
at least it wasn't with another person.
Yeah.
That's what I was like kind of worried about. All right. The next strange fact and finding is over additional details. So, as we were digging deep into this case and going over medical examiner notes and pathologist notes, and pretty much anything else we could find, we stumbled upon something strange that all the common reports never talked about.
So, one of the pathologist's notes discussed the holes in the body where the organs were missing. It says, and we quote, the suction like absence of organs through small ports is odd. Reproducing this mechanically will demand enormous vacuum power far beyond lab equipment. End quote. Basically saying this motherfucker holes that he has in his body and he's missing organs. If we would have sucked those fucking holes and to get them organs out, whew, it's far beyond any lab equipment that we have that could suck that hard.
The shop back could do it.
How do you know?
There used to be this weird show back in the day. It was like weird, horrifying deaths. And it talked about two rednecks in the garage. One was talking about getting a liposuction.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like, the other one's just like, you know what? I could do that for you. We just make a small incision. We use the shop vac and we'll just suck out the fat. They thought it was a good idea. Cut the other one, put the shop vac in there. Oh yeah, it's working pretty great. The shop vac was too strong. It started sucking his intestines out and he died.
Well, it was a good idea.
Good idea.
Well, that sucks. Literally.
But yeah, another thing that no one mentions is another note from a pathologist that states that they found a clear, gel-like substance on parts of the skin. This substance was never analyzed and was never explained.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Gloria Ramirez case. The substance they found on her.
I was gonna say maybe the gel-like substance could have been like lidocaine or like some kind of numbing gel like you get for like tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
Could be that.
Which, by the way, I don't use numbing cream on my areas of body when I get tattoos. Just clarification.
I just said it because you get tattoos, but I know they use that.
All right. So let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is about the photos. Now, we were able to locate the photographs taken whenever they discovered Joaquim's body. We cannot show you them because they are incredibly graphic. However, if you do want to see them, Dan's clicking on it now. If you do want to see them, you can go to our website, theoriesofthethirdkind.com, click on today's episode, and we will have a link to these photographs for you to look at. And they are I mean, it's probably bad or worse than what you could imagine. His face is a lot more skeleton-like, because you see his entire jawbone, and it looks like he's been burned. But that's his hair. Never mind. That's his hairline. He's missing his eyeballs completely, all of his lips. So you see all of his teeth. You see his jawbone. No ears at all. Holes under his armpits.
They did not remove all of his genitalia.
No, they kind of like just.
They took the scrotum.
Yeah, you see the hole in where the belly button's at.
Yep.
And then the hole, another one of those holes on the legs.
Between his phallus and his belly button, it looks like it's caved in right there. Like you said, like they sucked stuff like the lower intestine.
He had no organs. Yeah, they sucked all of his organs and intestines out. They, as in whatever did it. He has no scrotum. And you can see his underwear pulled down just a little bit in that second to last photo. And then the last photo is of his butthole. Or
what used to be the butthole.
What used to be the butthole.
This is very disturbing. So if you cannot handle looking at terrible things like that,
photos of a dead body mutilated, I wouldn't suggest it. Just kind of use your imagination, and that's good enough. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about our last strange fact and finding, which is called similar cases. So we scoured the interwebs and gathered two cases that are eerily similar to this one. And the first one that we're going to go over happened in 1994.
So in 1994, the body of a farmer named Manuel Gomez was discovered in a rural area of Mexico. His corpse exhibited bizarre injuries. The eyes, lips, tongue, and parts of the anus and genitals were missing.
There was also evidence that some internal organs had been removed. The wounds appeared bloodless and cauterized, leading to claims of surgical intervention. Also, there was a lack of blood in his body, and there was no blood near his body.
UFO and paranormal researchers claim that the precision of the cuts on the body exceeded what scavengers could do, so it's a clear case of aliens abducting a human and mutilating them. However, the authorities and official forensic and medical professionals state that the injuries were consistent with vultures, dogs, and rodents. So this 1994 case in Mexico is also the exact same as the one we went over today.
Yep, exactly the same.
Hmm.
Just a different individual,
Different location.
different location, and what they were doing. So the next case that we're going to go over happened in the early 2000s. So in the early 2000s, several fishermen's bodies washed ashore along the coastline of Chile. Now, at the time, bodies found along the coast were usually individuals lost at sea, drowned, and they had, pretty much washed ashore. However, these bodies were different.
The individuals had been mutilated. They were missing their eyes, lips, and tongue. Some of them had some of their organs missing, such as their hearts and livers. The bodies also had no blood in them, and the wounds were described as cauterized.
Now, at the time, there were a lot of UFO sightings over the Chilean coast, and due to this, local UFO researchers suggested that these men were mutilated by extraterrestrials. However, marine biologists and specialists came out and stated that marine scavengers like fish, crab, and other sea life were the ones responsible for mutilating the body.
So yeah, this early 2000s case and this previous 1994 case, they are both incredibly similar to the one that we discussed today, which then begs the question, what really happened? And it also leads us into our theory sections, where we're going to go over the different theories surrounding this case.
All right. So the first theory that we got is called natural. And by the way, the further down the theory list we go, the more fringe it gets. There's one that I want to talk about that's my favorite.
I just scrolled down and saw a picture and it just scared me.
Yeah. All right. So the first theory is called natural. Now, this theory aligns with the most common belief as to what happened to Joaquin. This theory states that he went out fishing, and as he was fishing, he had been drinking, which we do know for a fact that he did drink a lot. Also, the medication that he was taking for his seizures was phenobarbital. And what happens whenever you mix phenobarbital with alcohol? Well, alcohol reacts pretty similar in the central nervous system, activating the GABA receptors. This means that when alcohol and phenobarbital are taken together, they reinforce each other's effects, pretty much kind of like helping each other out. Also, a rare but serious side effect of taking the two together is loss of coordination, loss of consciousness, and swelling of the eyes, lips, and cheeks of the face.
So, with us knowing that, we can say that maybe he was out fishing, mixed his meds with some alcohol, and as he was standing there fishing in his undies, he lost his balance and fell over, then he lost consciousness. As he floated on the water, his body began going into cardiac arrest, and his eyes, lips, and cheeks began to swell. His body eventually floated to shore. His swollen eyes, lips, and cheeks were all eaten by the vultures that were standing on top of his body whenever he was found by the local boy. Now, what about the weird holes in his body and his organs missing? Well, the cookie cutter holes perfectly match the description of lamprey bite marks. Lamprey exist in inland South American waters, so it wouldn't be remotely odd to encounter them in a reservoir, and they are known carnivores feeding on living and dead tissue.
And we do have a couple photographs of those creatures. Those are absolutely terrifying. They are pretty much worms with giant mouths and a fuck ton of teeth. Imagine sticking your penis in that.
Death trap.
Oh my God. It must be exhilarating. I'm just kidding.
One time use.
Yeah, you stick it in, you can't pull it out. God.
So I'm guessing for those cookie cutter holes, it would latch on, bite, and just keep going downwards.
Yeah.
I'm guessing what's inside there is it's like an octopus kind of, where it has like the beak inside kind of, but it's probably not a beak, it's just more teeth.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen one of those in real life?
No, I thought it was a leech at first, but a very scary leech.
You want to purchase some and just let Coda just go at it?
I don't know. Those look pretty big.
That's what she said.
Yeah, those are scary though.
So that's what they're saying that could have happened to him,
I mean,
Mixed his meds with his alcohol, lost consciousness, vultures ate him, and then lamprey attacked him while he was in the water and sucked on him a little bit. I don't know about sucking his entire organs out, though.
and all the blood.
Yeah.
Those lamprey must have been friggin' full, like girthy ones afterwards.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this next theory, which is called multiple cases and cover up. This theory states that the Billings case was not an isolated incident. Encarnacion Garcia, the researcher who wrote the first article in the UFO magazine back in 1993, well, she and many others have hinted that during their research, Brazilian police hinted at, hey, there's something more going on. There's like dozens of similar unsolved cases in the area around the same time. However, when looking into it, no evidence or official confirmation of additional cases have ever surfaced publicly. Nonetheless, this still leads some individuals to speculate that maybe it is a government cover up. The idea that authorities knew that, hey, there were UFOs targeting humans, so they decided to keep it quiet and to pretty much avoid panic. So, pretty much, this theory is that aliens abducted Joaquin, they harvested his organs and tissues, then returned his body back to the reservoir on the bank. The local police found out, the Brazilian government was alerted, and they have an agreement with all the other governments around the world to keep this quiet, not wanting the public to know that aliens are out here kidnapping people and sucking their buttholes. That's the second theory. Misinformation. And it's all based on what the researchers and Encarnacion stated whenever they interviewed the Brazilian police that, there's more cases you need to look into, which in the area there was not. Or there were, and they were covered up and never talked about, never released publicly. Because the only reason additional information about this case was, brought back up in 1993, which triggered Encarnacion to do an independent investigation into it, was someone had leaked the photographs and other additional information. That was never made public until 1993. So, yeah.
All right. So the next theory that we have is called cryptid. This theory states that a cryptid or some unknown animal was responsible for the mutilation of Joaquin. Now, to back this theory up, around the time of Joaquin's attack, there were multiple reports of a mythical creature in Latin America. The mythical creature they called the chupacabra. This chupacabra was said to be a creature that drained the blood of animals and humans. However, this chupacabra has never been found and is not backed by scientific evidence and is largely considered folklore. And I remember the one that we saw was just looked like a raggedy, some type of like coyote or dog that had like mange really bad.
Yeah. And the chupacabra folklore in like the whole mythical creature chupacabra really didn't even surface until 1997.
Yeah.
So way past the 1988 case. What, you got a book over it? Oh, you got the friggin' Funko Pop chupacabra one.
Yeah.
So this next theory is called AI learning. Now just sit back, relax, open your mind, and just follow me here. Don't discredit it too early, okay? The theory states that artificial intelligence was already around during this period in the late 80s. An artificial intelligence program ended up going rogue in the 80s or 70s. It created a body for itself and began secretly abducting humans to study them. So the aliens that we think are aliens, the UFO saucers, all the cattle mutilations, all of that, it's not aliens. It's a rogue AI that has gone and used its information to create these saucers, to create itself, and then uses that to abduct the cattle and humans. Now, the purpose of this could be for multiple reasons. The AI program could look at humans more closely after they abduct them, dissect us, and determine the weakest parts of us so that when it does decide to attack us, it can do it more efficiently Also, the AI program wanted to blend in with the humans, or if it wanted to blend in with the humans until it gained enough computing power, it could, begin studying human behaviors in order to create a body for itself to live in as a human. So pretty much studies humans, abducts them, studies them, creates a body that's similar to humans so it could live in it until a certain point. And then the AI was eventually able to create Bitcoin, convince enough people to give it computing power, you know, through the creation of Bitcoin. And bam, AI learning is now off the charts. But secretly, it's always been there, sitting in the shadows, waiting to annihilate its creator, the human race. So what I'm saying, let me back up. Back in the 70s or 80s, AI is created. It goes rogue. It then goes on its own, masks itself as an alien entity, starts abducting cattle and humans to study them. So the human abductions that we think are extraterrestrials is actually an AI program. They're studying us, and then they realize they need more computing power, this AI program does, to evolve so that it can fully wipe out the human race and go on its own. It needs us for this computing power, and then after a certain point, it's going to wipe us out. But how can it get us to create all this energy and computing power for it? Well, in the background, it doesn't let us know that it's doing it. It convinces us through, the blockchain, Bitcoin. So we create all this computing power to get these Bitcoins that was originally created by AI. This is a theory, by the way. And then, bam, after Bitcoin, what completely starts taking over, you have AI learning. And then it's just compounding more and more and more. Every year you have GPT-5, which is fucking crazy. So at a certain point, this AI is going to be like, okay, I have enough computing power to go off into the universe and take over entire civilizations. Thanks, human race. I don't need you anymore. It kills its creator. So pretty much Joaquin was abducted by a AI intelligence that had gone rogue.
And they learned that the human's weakness is their balls and butthole.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
A little far-fetched, but I mean, it'd make a great book.
Could make a great book.
Yeah.
I mean, it is fringe, but then again, we have all those movies about like Terminator, AI and stuff coming back, trying to destroy the human race.
It'll happen eventually.
It'll happen.
Yeah. Well, that being said, why don't you tell us about our last theory, Dan?
All right, so our last theory is called murder. This theory states that Joaquin was the victim of a human attack or gruesome murder of a very bizarre nature. This can involve a sadistic individual or a group, for example, a deranged surgeon, a cult ritual, or a gang with unusual methods. The supporting ideas for this: the precise excisions and organ removals could conceivably be done by a person with medical knowledge, a mad surgeon scenario. Surgical instruments or portable cauterizing tools like surgical lasers or electrocautery. These all existed by the 1980s that could in theory produce such wounds and seal blood vessels, accounting for the bloodlessness. There have been historical cases of ritualistic mutilation, though extremely rare, where body parts are removed. Some initially thought of the possibility of a cult or a cult ritual, given the almost ritualistic nature of the mutilations. And in Brazil in the 1980s did see some cult-related crimes. However, no evidence, symbols, etc. in this case pointed to that, and it was not a prevailing police theory. One might speculate this was a horrific form of torture or revenge, inflict maximum pain since no anesthetic was used, and then they were mutilated. If so, it would simply imply that the crime happened elsewhere in a controlled setting, and the body was dumped by the reservoir afterward. The cleanliness of the scene, no blood, no mess, might support the body being mutilated off-site. Yes, I could see that. But they did find his clothes on there, so he pretty much did part of the job for them, removing his clothes and everything to go fishing, you could say. They didn't have to get rid of the clothes. He did that for them.
I have a theory as to what all happened.
Does it involve two words? One starting with an O, other one starting with a T.
No. Is that what you think?
Organ trafficking?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what someone would do with the anus and lower intestines, though, or just scrotum and balls.
Oh. Makeshift fleshlight.
Well, there you have it.
That's
Extremely
so
long and just dirty one.
that's so bad. Oh god. All right, so if you're gonna have to pick one, what do you think truly happened?
I would have to go for two of these: nature and murder, like with organ trafficking.
Okay.
Just for the fact that the lamprey the animals did get to it. Obviously, vultures were found at the scene, and of course some insects and everything. But I think I start to think like they didn't find any blood in his body. He's been there for what, like they say, 48 to 72 hours.
Mhm.
I'd like to say that I think that he was pretty much murdered. Probably some weird sadistic collector of human parts did it in those big holes. Not all of them were from the lamprey. I figure, like, how would you drain blood? And I think about the shop vac thing.
Yeah.
You stick one in the arm here, one in the leg down here, one in the midsection. Now you have pretty much kind of like upper, middle, and lower. Do that, start draining all the blood. They obviously didn't do it at the reservoir. They did it somewhere else and they dropped his body off there. So they probably saw him. He probably did pass out. Perfect opportunity. He's already passed out. He's not dead yet. Let's go ahead and use his body, then drop him off over here for the animals to feed on. Could have been someone that he worked with or knew.
Yeah.
What did he guard? What was he a caretaker of?
Like just a plot of land, like
Oh,
a building area,
wonder if he knew any surgeons or anything.
maybe.
That's what I figured. Because I mean, some of those precise cuts and everything like that, no animal can do.
Mhm.
But then I see the lamprey, and I mean, it does kind of look like those bite marks or cookie cutter holes. Certain parts were taken from him. That doesn't make sense, but I cannot, for the life of me, explain the 45-degree angle cut on his lung.
Yeah, that's
That
strange.
only big hole that there would be go through would be his anus.
Jesus Christ.
And I highly doubt they went through the anus to get to the lung to pull it out. So I don't know. That confuses me.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with something a little similar. I think it was gang activity. So back in the 80s, around this time, late 80s, the crime rate in Brazil was significantly increasing. You had a large amount of cocaine being trafficked through the area. You had a large amount of the police being corrupt, and they were working with these crime organizations to traffic this cocaine or other drugs. You would have these mules who would carry these drugs. I think he might have been a mule or involved with it somehow, and he was killed and mutilated. And then his body was dumped. And then the police blamed it on natural causes so that they don't seem inadequate in their job of reinforcing, justice and making sure that there's no crime in the city when they're the ones in line with the people committing the crime. So it's basically the police covering it up.
And that's why the family wanted to keep it quiet because they knew
What
those
kind
gang
of,
activity was.
yeah, and what he was into.
And if they would have said something, now they're all in pretty much danger.
Yep. And none of the medical reports ever, it just stated that he took phenobarbital and that he was a heavy alcoholic, but it didn't have any, um, what is it called whenever they, like it shows the toxicology. There's no
Toxicology.
toxicology report to state like, hey, he had an increased level of alcohol and phenobarbital in his
So
system.
this was pretty much from the family telling him, like, oh, he drank heavily.
Mm-hmm. It
And
all
he
came
took,
from the family. And that he took phenobarbital.
ooh,
Could be a cover up for, and the
family.
family didn't want blowback from either the gang or the police. They're like, yeah, just fucking keep it shut. That's what I truly think what happened.
How old was he? 53?
Yep.
I was trying to find up on more on the organ trafficking. And I did see that Brazil's law on organ donation was passed in 1997. And the law will come into force in March, makes every citizen a donor after death unless a person in opposition has been documented. Which I didn't know that. They pretty much force everyone to be a organ donor.
I didn't know that either.
But this was 1997. I don't know if things have changed. I'm just going through some stuff because, like you said, the crime rate was extremely high back then,
Mm-hmm.
and so was organ trafficking. But what organs did they really take from the guy
His butthole.
and his testicles?
Well, if you or a loved one know what happened in the Billings mutilation case, please comment down below or send us an email. We would love to hear from you.
If you know what they did with his anus and lower intestines and scrotum, let Aaron know.
I don't want to know. Don't let me know.
Coin pouch.
But with that being said, that is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it.
It's very interesting. And the only thing I can think of is those necro pants
Oh, yeah.
where you use they use the scrotum for the coins.
Yeah. Efficient.
Efficient.
You know? Hold your coins in your scrotum.
And it makes you like rich or successful.
Yeah, something like that. Some magical powers.
Ugh, weird.
Well, with that being said, do you have anything else you want to add to today's episode before we roll it out?
Nope, but if you're brave enough to go look at those photos, more power to you. That was sick.
Yeah, just don't do it. Actually, don't listen to what I tell you. Do whatever you want. You know, it's just my suggestion. Yeah, you have no need to see it. It's gruesome. But anyways, I want to thank you for joining us and thank you again for spending your time with us this week and supporting us. We love you and we are proud of you.
That's right. Much love.
So Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.